Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Warehouse. I'm your host, Josh Johnson, and today, like always, we have an incredible guest and an incredible topic. We have with us Matt Shanaghan, who locally has garnered a reputation not only as an artist, more specifically a muralist, but as a expert, if you will, on graffiti and the culture that surrounds it. And so graffiti, first of all, thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. No, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Graffiti is something that has come up peripherally in so many episodes of the show. You know, here or there, it'll be speckled in the conversation. This is a topic and a conversation that I have been waiting to have because I am just such a fan of graffiti, but I also understand the cognitive dissonance that goes around it. Is it vandalism? Is it art? I get all of that stuff. But for whatever it is, let's talk about it today. So let's jump right in. The origins of graffiti. We see it mainly in the big cities. The main two are Philly and New York. I have a question for you. Why do you think, and I know nobody knows exactly, but why do you think people started doing it?
I mean, that's kind of a tough one, you know.
Sure.
It's funny. I mean, you can go all the way back to, paintings on walls and caves, It's funny, some of the first, earliest recorded graffiti back in, ancient Rome, criticizing leaders and stuff like that, and it still holds true today. I think, it's a way for people to feel like their voice is being heard when maybe they feel like they can't affect the things around them, and it's something anyone can do.
You know, what you just said touched on a really cool point. It was Dr. King, I think. He was asked about riots. How do you feel about riots? And obviously he wasn't a proponent of rioting, but he said, I do understand that at some degree it's the language of the unheard. And that kind of hits on what you just said. Sometimes graffiti can be the language of the unheard. Is it the bathroom wall effect? When we go into the bathroom, we just have that itch to draw on the wall. Or do you think it's more substantive than that?
I think it's tricky because that's kind of subjective, I mean, my reasoning for getting into it and wanting to paint, is probably worlds apart from someone else's reason for getting into it. For me, it just started as something, being young, being in a punk band, going to punk and hardcore shows, seeing album covers with graffiti on them, something I wanted to do,
Sure.
So, I mean, the first graffiti, I remember the first thing I ever painted was in a ditch in a neighborhood. It was my band's name.
The band's name was A Ditch in a Neighborhood?
No. So my band's name was Composition B, but I spray painted it on this ditch. It was like, no one's going to see this. You know what I mean? And it was so silly, but it just, it just caught me from there. And, it's one of these things where once you do it, I mean, the possibilities are endless. You can really you could do anything with it,
Like a tattoo or a Lay's potato chip. You can't just have one.
That's right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we see it spool out from these metropolitan areas. And as it stands today, you can find graffiti in every corner of the country, hell, in every corner of the world.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Does that speak to how art is contagious, or how the emotion that drives art is contagious? Or is it just what it is?
In my opinion, it's just, it's like the purest form of expression to me, just because, it's just having a pencil in your hand. What do you want to do? You want to doodle. Everyone likes to doodle,
Sure.
whether they consider themselves an artist or not. And, anyone can find a piece of chalk, a pencil, a marker, and you can etch your name into something, and you can go back years later and still find it. The idea that you can make your mark on something that is lasting, possibly beyond you, I think is what drives a lot of people to do it,
Man, that had some poetic integrity to it. Graffiti is literally leaving your mark on something.
Yeah.
And leaving our mark is kind of the human endeavor. And so I guess in that way, graffiti and life talk to each other. So Here's the big one. We can't have this conversation without this type of dueling sword of, is graffiti art or is graffiti vandalism?
I think, at its temporal beginning, yeah, it's vandalism, but it's one of those things that I think everyone has to grapple with how they are going to approach it and how they're going to kind of square that circle in their head. Because, in this day and age now, I mean, graffiti is you see marketing campaigns of graffiti. There's, legal graffiti. There's, graffiti on clothing. There's all sorts of stuff. If we're talking about pure graffiti tagging, doing throw ups, pieces, stuff like that, from writer to writer, everyone kind of has their own idea of what lines they will cross and will not cross. For most of the people that I knew and for me, I mean, I'm not going to write on, anyone's car, anyone's home, anything like that. It would be commercial properties, train bridges, things like that, are just not kept up with, these things that are a lot of people consider eyesores, these big giant buildings owned by corporations. I mean, things like that. It's still a crime, it's still something that you're risking your freedom to do. But to me, it was worth it, To
Sure.
me, I like seeing the art, whether it's something that I find personally gratifying to look at or not. I just appreciate art. I appreciate people expressing themselves.
Absolutely. Man, that was, first of all, an incredible answer. And there was so much meat to eat off of that bone. And so one of my follow-up questions would be, the anonymity. People don't take into account, or maybe they do, I don't know, I shouldn't have said that to do this isn't just a trade of posterity. There's some risk to this, right?
Yeah.
If you're caught, you could, like you said, risk your freedom or your financial stake, doing this graffiti. And so it either has to be something that's impulsive or something that's dedicated to. And I think the reason, and I could be wrong because I'm not an expert on everything, I just think I am, the reason that graffiti has taken hold in pop culture so much is part and parcel because of that risk. Somebody is sacrificing something, and what speaks more to art than sacrifice, right? Than denying yourself. And I think that's just such a cool part of it. Let me ask you this while we're on the subject of art and vandalism, or art versus vandalism. What do you think about Banksy?
I mean, if you would have asked me this about 10 years ago, I probably would have had a snarky answer. But, now that I'm older, it's not my cup of tea, but it's cool, I mean, this is, they're doing something, they're making a statement. I think, the things that they paint, I think, are bringing attention to a lot of things that should be the focus, either, with any art form, there's people who are going to say, oh, this person's sold out, this person that. But to me, it's just, we all have to find our own meaning and what it means to us. And everyone else's opinion on it is kind of irrelevant. But I mean, I think he's cool.
I think your snarky opinion 10 years ago was more in line with the question, because a lot of the conversations that I hear around Banksy, and I'll leave my own personal opinions out of it, even though I have hundreds on whoever the person is, and some of them are snarky too, is while it's graffiti, technically, it's also kind of anti-graffiti, because it's celebrated. You can tell it comes from some place of privilege. I mean, you got some in Utah overnight, to New York, to Boston, to the West Bank. You got to be a person of means to even be able to do these things in some of these locations. And so it's kind of anti-graffiti, which is what I have heard so often about not only their work, but the work that surrounds the co-opting of what graffiti was originally supposed to be.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, that is, I mean, I would agree with that critique for sure. It's, it's tricky. I mean, that's the fine line everyone has to walk, because, I mean, I still have friends who paint. I've I have friends who are, felons now because of painting. It's something where if you're going to dedicate yourself to doing graffiti forever, or as long as you can, the risks are outrageous. Some people bow out and they want to make a living off it and things like that, which I can't knock too much now that I'm older. I do agree with you, where I do think that, the instances where there's these Banksy stencils that have, you have cities putting like plaques over them, and they'll persecute people. There will be some poor kid who gets a felony charge and gets thrown in jail. And, this person gets to blow into town and put up a stencil and they're framing it, I mean, that is a little silly for sure.
Absolutely.
But that's the struggle. I mean, all these art forms get co-opted eventually,
Sure. Man, a perfect segue. Sometimes, and I'll get your take on this too, sometimes that co-opting might be healthy just by metric. Because when we have conversations in municipalities or cities across the nation or world about public art, we understand that public art kind of soothes certain sentiments, right? Sometimes it can lower crime, and sometimes it can engender more pride in communities, whatever it is. If we understand that about public art, can graffiti then latch on to that and say, in some way, it is doing a service to people and not just to the creator?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, for me, it was tricky because, when I first started painting, I mean, Gain Street in 2005 does not look like Gain Street now. And, I would have to sneak out and I'd get rides and we'd go running around and in the warehouses and everything. And it's, you couldn't pay people to go over there. And, but we were able to paint and you could drive by and you could have pride in it and you'd hear people talking about it. You'd see people post pictures of it. And I think that it does certainly do a service. I think it's better than, some of the things that we are forced to see as far as advertising. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control when we're just living in a city, a lot of things that we have to see that we don't really get a say over. And so I think the idea of being able to, spruce it up, with or without permission, you're going to have people who don't like it, but I think more often than not, you're going to have people who do.
Absolutely. Or at least can appreciate it.
Right.
You brought up another good point. I was talking to Donna Nudd and Terry Galloway just last night of Mickey Faust, about what, Gain Street used to be when they were right by the old warehouse, And that's a perfect segue also, because you're right. People used to, still today in some small sample size, it was a seedy part of town and it was a scary place to be. And like you said, you couldn't pay somebody to go over there and spend time in one of those warehouses at night doing anything, let alone some art endeavor. But it also now speaks to where this art form bubbled up from. Poor folk, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this huge class divide that we're dealing with writ large, but also in the arts. And I don't think it's seen anywhere better than graffiti. Let's talk about that for a while. From how you understand it, was it protest? Was it rebellion? I guess you kind of answered this in your first answer. What made the class or the demographics of people that started graffiti start graffiti?
If like cornbread. Cornbread is often
Daryl McRae. Yeah,
that's right.
absolutely.
He's often credited as one of the first people to write his own nickname. Aside from street gangs putting up their names and stuff like that. And that was all in pursuit of a girl. He went through a neighborhood and kept writing his nickname that he got when he was in a juvenile detention center, and it paid off. And I think that story is, I did the same thing with my wife. It's a tale as old as time. But, then you look at someone like Dondi White and, Dondi White coming around, in the 70s in New York and trying to be a young kid growing up, facing all the challenges that he had to in that city at that time. It's an escape for a lot of people. I think it is a way to, um, uplift yourself, and you can be anything you want. With the anonymity, with the we being anonymous.
Sure.
You can. To me, that was the allure, and I think that's the allure of a lot of people. Is you're born into these places where you don't have a lot of say over your surroundings. It's just by virtue that you ended up there, and you can't feel like you can affect them in any meaningful way. So the idea that I can grab a can of paint or a marker and I can transport myself to I can paint on these walls and make it look like New York City, even though I'm stuck in Tallahassee, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I can turn myself into anyone I want, and it to me it was a huge confidence boost. That's what I think it is for a lot of people. Not having the means to go to art school myself or things like that. I did it on my own. I said, okay, if I can't do that, then I'm gonna put my art out, and you're gonna have to see it.
So before I get into my next question, I want to beat you up on something that you just said, just because I have to.
Yeah.
As a 7th-generation Leon Countyan, and as somebody who flies the Tallahassee flag, New York should be painting murals of Tallahassee because they're
Absolutely.
stuck in New York.
Right.
We are the greatest city on planet Earth. Now, I know we just...
Now that I'm older and wiser, I agree. I agree for
My
sure.
man.
For sure.
My man. So, art comes with, well, you know what? Maybe this is an irresponsible way to ask a question on responsibility, but I'm no stranger of getting myself into trouble, so I'm going to do it. Most art, people would say, comes with the responsibility. I am somebody who says that art does come with the responsibility. I've talked to people just as credible who has said, no, art doesn't come with the responsibility. The responsibility is the creation itself. It's a two-part question. Do you believe that there's a responsibility to art?
Yeah, I believe so. I do. I mean, it's expression, so we should be able to express ourselves, and I fully support that. But no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, it's got to be, it's got to be within some kind of reason,
Sure.
you know.
And then the second part is, if there's a responsibility, what do you think, and this is an absolute subjective answer, what do you think the responsibility of graffiti would be or is?
That's a tough one. I think in a lot of cases it's difficult because you're committing a crime. You're painting on things. But there's also countless stories about, I mean, in me similarly, where you'll get these stores, maybe they're covered in tags, maybe they're getting painted all the time, and you say, hey, look, let me paint it. I'm someone who paints. The other writers know me. I can paint you a mural and it'll never get tagged again. I'll put up some art for you. There's things like that. There's things that you can
What
do.
is it because and I'm not saying that graffiti artist is a thief, but just to use that old adage, is it because there's honor amongst thieves? Other graffiti writers know not to touch Matt's work, and so if you do it, it won't be touched?
Yeah, or vice versa.
Sure, sure.
One of the older people that I looked up to when I was coming up, if hey, I want to go tag this wall and they had something on it, I'm not going to paint over them.
Absolutely.
I'm going to leave it, and that's there is a hierarchy in there as far as there's a lot of respect. It's all a sport.
This is an organized crime.
Right, right. In a sense, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we're all just competing with each other to do better, but and to get a bigger spot, to paint the next spot. But there's things you can do. You can painting schools, teaching lessons. There's things that graffiti writers do, and can do and have done. I mean, they're certainly not all going to do it, but there is a way to give back for sure.
Speaking of there is a way, that's also a perfect segue into my next question. I've been all over this country and in small part all over this planet, and I have seen graffiti in places that I say, how did a person even get in that spot? On the inside of the culture, is it a higher endeavor to do a spot that seems unreachable?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's I mean from back when they were painting subway trains, and once they shut that down, I mean there's still people painting subway trains in 2025. It's
Sure.
extremely risky. A lot of the train yards have armed guards, but to have a picture of your graffiti on a subway car in New York City and Chicago, anywhere is, I mean, that's the peak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just about who can paint the better spot. I would see someone go out and do something. I'd say, okay, I'm going to try and climb higher than you.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to try and put my name up higher than your name.
What are you guys? Acrobats? Are you dangling? Are you
no,
using
no.
ladders? What is going on? Are you climbing out of windows and free climbing?
It's a lot of like Three Stooges acts, standing on my shoulders, I'm standing on someone else's shoulders type of deal. You have people hanging off the side of buildings and stuff. We did a lot of reckless stuff, and I've known a lot of people do a lot of reckless things, but it is all just to say you did it, to put your name out there, and everyone has to see it, and everyone has to see my art. And when they're driving by, whether they like it or not, it's going to catch their eye on top of that roof, and they're going to have to acknowledge me,
And my name doesn't have to be Picasso,
Right.
Basquiat, or Damien Hirst. I can be anybody, and you still have to see my work.
Exactly.
You have to reckon with me, for better or for worse.
Right. I may not be able to get into art school. I may not have the means to get myself into a gallery, but I can find some paint. I can rummage around my folks' shed, and I can find some spray cans, and I can paint something you're going to have to look at.
Absolutely. So first of all, this has been a great spot. And I want to close it with a question that I ask a lot of guests. And I always put them on the spot when I ask them this, so I don't want you to feel alone. But my question is, if there is a definition, what is the definition of art to you?
Art to me, it is feeling something so viscerally inside yourself that you can't help but put it on a piece of paper or record it in an audio format or a video or a dance, or it is feeling something that you can't quite describe so much that you have to show the world. You have to do it. You can't help yourself.
It's a follicle.
Yeah.
You can't naturally stop it from growing.
Right.
Well, brother, in closing, I will say you mentioned one of my favorite taggers of all time, who's Daryl McRae, Cornbread.
Yeah.
And there's something that his name and what you did for us today have in common. You have given us a slice of something so substantive that it will keep us full until the very next episode. Matt, I appreciate you so much for stopping by and having this conversation with me about something that I've wanted to talk about for a year now. And I want to thank everybody at home for joining us for another episode of The Warehouse. See you next time. Bye-bye.